All right, so let's actually execute some commands on the shell. So of course, we're gonna need our VM machine. I've started it up here. So I did start up a new VM. I did use Ubuntu. Remember if you kept the default password. So nowadays with Ubuntu, it has something called unattended installation, meaning that it kind of just does some of the basic setup for you. So if it you didn't have a chance to change the user or the password, just remember the password is change me, CHANGEME. There you go. So when you first start up, it's gonna ask you give you a few prompts. Do you want to connect your online accounts? You can just skip this. Skip for now. We're just gonna skip this. No, yes, it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna put no. It says, welcome to Ubuntu. Do you want to enable location services? I'm gonna keep that off. And then if you want to download certain apps, you can definitely have Spotify on your VM, VS Code if you're a programmer. We're not gonna be using any of this. So we're not gonna be downloading any of that. So we're just gonna hit done. All right, so it has some apps here pinned to our taskbar. You can definitely remove some of these apps like Thunderbird Mail. I'm going to remove from my favorites. Firefox, I'll keep it there, in case you want to navigate to the internet on your VM. I'm going to remove this music or audio playing app. I'm going to remove this document writer. I'll leave this Ubuntu software store. But there's one we're going to add to our favorites, and that's the most important one, right, for this week is going to be, and perhaps for the entire class, right, is the bash shell, the bash terminal. So how do we get to the bash terminal? If you click on these show application, this little, it's like 9 dots, right? It's just a little icon for apps. You click on it, it's going to open all your apps. You can certainly search for it. You can navigate through the different pages by clicking on these dots. Just know the one we're looking for is called terminal. So you click on terminal. Just to make it easier to get to, so you don't have to go to these apps, you can just right click on it and you can do add to favorites. So just like a faster way of getting there. All right, so let's go ahead and I'm gonna have two windows open. I'm gonna have our slides and our bash terminal open. All right, so first of all, what is the shell prompt? So the shell prompt is once you do open your bash shell, you see this like gibberish VBox user at Williams VM. For some of you, at least one student had an issue with the name of their VM. Turns out you can't have an apostrophe for certain versions of Ubuntu, depending on that, like I said, unattended installation. Just take off the apostrophe and then you'll be able to move forward on the next steps. So you see here it says VBox user at Williams VM colon. It's got a little curly, it's called the tilde, and then it's got the $sign. So this is the shell prompt. So it's basically your user. So this is VBox user, VirtualBox user. That's the default username when you make a VM on VirtualBox. At is the host name, so that's your computer. In this case, it's our virtual machine, which I called, in my case, it's Williams VM. That would be, your name and then VM. Don't worry about the apostrophe, like I said. And then you'll have the tilde, and then you'll have the directory. In this case, I'm already in my home directory. We'll talk about how the home directory corresponds to this little tilde symbol. That tilde symbol is on your keyboard. If you do Shift, and then it's the key right to the left of the number 1. You can do the tilde symbol right there. We'll be using that shortly. And then the $sign. So the tilde symbol is your directory. We'll talk about directories in a sec. But just know, just a little bit of information on your VM and the user. That's all that means. The $sign is for regular users. The hashtag, the £sign, is for the root user. So that's a user with elevated privileges. We don't need to cover all the details on that. Just know that, this prompt is just giving you a little bit of information. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So navigating the shell. So if you want to navigate the shell, first let's type in a command. So I'm going to type in some gibberish. I'm just going to hit my keyboard, type in some random, nonsense. And then I'm gonna hit enter. And then when I hit enter, sorry, it's running a little slow. I might have given my VM a little bit too much memory. Remember, if your computer's running hot, if it's, the fan's going crazy, just make a new VM, give it a little bit less memory, and that should do the trick. All right, so I hit enter after typing in that gibberish. It says command not found. Of course, it's going to say that, right, because we didn't actually type in a valid command. We'll be covering some valid commands in a sec. All right, so let's do some basic navigation in the shell. So some of the basic keys you can use on your keyboard to navigate through the shell is your arrow keys. So if you go up and down on the arrow keys, so if I hit up after typing in enter, it's actually going to pull up my last command. I did run a few other commands previously, so if I go further up, you'll see I have some other commands. If I go to the very, very top, I'll get I'll hit a limit there because I don't have any elder commands, and I'll hear a little, almost like knocking sound, a little like bell sound. It's just letting me know there's no more commands, right? There's none in the history of the command. So I go down, and I can go back to my latest commands. Let's say I'm on this nonsense command. If I want to go to different, letter or part of this command, I can navigate through the command using my left and right arrow keys. Very useful if you want to edit the command. So for example, if I wanted to put, I don't know, the letter Y at the beginning, I can navigate to the beginning using the Y. Some keys you probably never used before. I definitely invite you to find those. There's the home key. Home key will take you to the beginning of the command. End key will take you to the end of the command. Just a little bit extra information there, not totally necessary at the moment or for the class, just totally optional. Good one to remember though, right? If you want to very quickly get to the beginning and the end. So that's my home and end key. So it's going to look different on every keyboard. So definitely invite you to explore those keys. All right, so we got our first command, right? It wasn't an actual command. Um, just know that you can also copy paste commands. So we haven't actually gone through any commands yet, but let's say I go, this is an actual command. Let me do pwd. We'll go over what this means. We'll do cd. Just ignore some of these commands I'm doing. We'll go down. There you go. All right, so just know when you're typing in commands, you can actually use the tab key to autocomplete. So we're going to cover what this cd command does, but for example, as I'm going to the downloads folder, I don't actually have to type in the whole command. I can use my tab key and the shell will actually autocomplete the command for me. Because I already started typing in the name of this folder, the downloads folder, and if I hit tab, it's going to actually finish typing in the folder name for me. That's going to be really useful once we get more familiar with more commands. But it's a really good one to know early on. If you hit tab, it's going to auto-complete the command. This is something I didn't learn right away when I was first using the shell. I was, a few months into the job. I was typing commands manually, and then, one of my bosses says, "Hey, what are you doing? Just hit the tab key. It'll save you a lot of time." And boy, has it saved me tons and tons of time. Another useful one is copy paste. You might be familiar with Control C, Control V. Just know in the Ubuntu shell, if you want to copy a command, you can highlight. You can certainly do a right click to do copy and paste, right? If you're on the touchpad, if you're on a laptop, you could do a two-finger click to do right click. Just know you can also do this with the keyboard. It's not Control C. It's going to be Control Shift C. And then to paste is Control Shift V. That's the same on both Mac, Windows keyboards. It should be the same control. Definitely, if it doesn't work right, you could always try the command key. But according to what I looked up, it should be control for both Mac and Windows keyboards. I could definitely be wrong on the Mac side. I am a Windows guy, so definitely invite you to explore that if you're using a Mac computer. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. So let's do some very simple commands. Maybe some we're not going to be using super often. There will be two here that we'll probably use here and there, the top and the echo command. But just to get familiar with some of these commands, let's go ahead and type them in. So if you type in date, it will give you the current date and time. It even gives me the time zone there, Pacific time. If you do cal, it'll give you, should give you a calendar. Looks like we haven't installed it yet. So this one says, cal not found. df, this is going to give you the amount of free space in the computer, right? So I see I have a 1% I'm using in this drive. I'm using 11% in this other drive. 1% here, 2% there. Just giving you an example, right, of rather than clicking through buttons, right, the command line is all about typing in commands. And although it's not the prettiest, right, it does give you some useful information when you type in those commands. There's free as well. So tell you how much memory is free. So memory has to do with processing power, right, RAM. A very useful one is top. So if you've ever done a Control Shift V on your computer, or sorry, Control Alt Delete. I don't know why I said Control Shift V. Control Alt Delete, and you open your Task Manager, and you can see everything that's running on your computer. You could also navigate to the Task Manager through your search bar. Task Manager. So yeah, you can see everything that's running right on Task Manager. All the apps that are running. These are background processes as well. Definitely, if you are unfamiliar with this, definitely invite you to take my CIS 101 class. Gives you a little bit more information, right, about software, operating software, in addition to application software. Not necessary for this class, right? But definitely a recommended prerequisite. But yeah, the top command does the same thing as your task manager. It essentially pulls up all the processes running on your computer in real time. So here I can see VBox user, right? It's using 4% of my CPU, 6% of my memory, and it's running off of my, it's running, it looks like a minute and 12 seconds, or that might be an hour, 12 minutes and 51 seconds. So yeah, just information on the process being run. Very useful when you're running a software, right? I was running some really like heavy duty software, and I could see, oh, I was using way too much of my memory and CPUs. So I definitely saw that my VM wasn't powerful enough. For everything we're doing in this class, we're not going to be requiring a ton of memory, a ton of CPUs. So like I said, if you notice your computer's slow, your VM slow, or your computer's running hot, definitely just make a new VM and maybe give it a little bit less memory, a little bit less power, a little less juice. All right, so that's the top command. If I want to exit the top, the next slide is very useful for this. Control C is usually the way you exit like a process or a command. So if I hit Control C, it's kind of the go-to for exiting. If you want to exit the entire shell, you could do the exit command. Before we get to that one, let's go ahead and do one more command, the echo command. Echo, once we get to environment variables, that'll be useful, but if you hit echo, you're essentially asking the computer to print something out. So I could do echo William, and it's just going to print out William. Seems kind of silly, but once we get to environment variables, it's going to be a little bit more useful. So top and echo, probably the only ones we'll use maybe in the future. Even then, we'll use them very sparingly. Just know that these simple commands, just an example, getting your feet wet, right, with the command line and showing you that, hey, you type in a command, it gives you some information. Different, right, than the buttons that we're used to with a graphical user interface, the icons. Those are a little bit more user-friendly, but we're not going to let the unfriendliness, right, of command line scare us away. All right, so let's go to exit command. So we already did Control C. That's how you can exit a certain process, certain command. So when I ran top, I was kind of stuck there. I could type things in, right, but it's not doing anything. Just hit Control C. It'll exit. If you want to exit the entire shell, you just hit exit, it'll close it. So that's the same, right, as hitting this X symbol. So when I hit the X symbol, that's me using the graphical user interface. When I type in exit, I'm using the command line interface. All right, let me open up my terminal again. Remember, if you don't see it here on your taskbar, just make sure to open it through the applications, right click, and add to your favorites. That way it sticks around there, easier to navigate. Control D does the same thing as exit. We're just going to go ahead and move on to some navigation commands. So these are definitely more useful. I, of course, use these in my day-to-day whenever I'm running my virtual machine for work. Is navigating through my file system. So what is a file system? It's just what organizes and stores files on a storage device on your computer. It manages how data is stored and retrieved. So in Windows, you navigate your file system through the File Explorer app. So right, this app, right, like I have all my videos for the class, my downloads, documents, and so forth. If I was on a Mac computer, that would be your Finder app. In this class, of course, we're not going to be using an application. We're going to be using our command line interface, our bash terminal, our bash shell here. Remember, born again shell. Just know this is how we're going to type in commands, right, is using this shell. And remember, this is the bash shell. That's the type of shell that we use. There are other shells. For example, on Windows computers, we have PowerShell.